The US government shocked the car market with a shocking proposal. Classic cars are about to disappear from American roads forever. The United States government has proposed banning vintage vehicles by 2025, sparking outrage and disbelief among enthusiasts. They say it's about emissions, but is there more to this story? What's behind this bold proposal? How will it impact the economy and car culture? And can you fight back before it's too late? What's happening? Imagine waking up to discover that your beloved vintage car has been outlawed. Unthinkable, right? Yet this nightmare scenario might soon be a reality for millions of car enthusiasts across the United States. The US government has proposed a policy that could forever change the landscape of American car culture. By the year 2025, vintage cars may no longer be legal to drive on public roads. The justification: environmental concerns are tied to outdated emission standards. While classic cars account for only a fraction of vehicles on the road, proponents of this controversial proposal argue that their emissions disproportionately contribute to climate change. This bold move has sparked outrage, with critics questioning the real motives behind it. For many, this is not just a policy, it is a direct assault on freedom, heritage, and individuality. But what exactly is driving this proposal? To understand, we need to examine the environmental justifications at its core. Environmental justifications. Is banning vintage cars really about saving the planet, or is there something deeper at play? At the forefront of this proposal are environmental agencies and policymakers who claim it is a necessary step to combat climate change. They point to states like California, which have already implemented zero-emission zones in urban areas, as inspiration. These zones ban or heavily restrict vehicles that do not meet stringent emission standards. Classic cars, often built decades before modern emissions controls existed, are seen as significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Advocates of the ban argue that phasing out these vehicles is a critical step toward meeting ambitious climate goals. However, critics question the focus on vintage cars when other sources of pollution, like private jets, industrial operations, and cruise ships, far outweigh their impact. After all, most classic cars are driven sparingly, primarily for shows, parades, or weekend cruises. Their limited use raises doubts about the environmental benefits of targeting them. Environmental advocates argue that this is about setting a precedent for cleaner transportation systems. Still, detractors wonder if these vehicles are simply an easy scapegoat in a much larger battle. While the environmental arguments spark debate, the economic consequences of such a ban could be even more far-reaching. Economic ripples. Could banning vintage cars cripple a multi-billion-dollar industry and leave countless livelihoods in jeopardy? The collector car market is not just a hobby, it is an economic powerhouse. In the year 2020, the vintage car industry generated between $14 and $15 billion in revenue, supporting an intricate ecosystem of jobs. From mechanics and restorers to auction houses and event organizers, countless professionals depend on the industry to make a living. Community events like car shows and auctions are not merely gatherings, they are vital economic engines. Take Monterey Car Week in California, for example, which generates millions of dollars in tourism revenue every year. Local businesses, from hotels to restaurants, thrive on the influx of visitors during these events. A ban on vintage cars could decimate this thriving sector, leaving communities and small businesses in financial turmoil. Additionally, classic cars contribute significantly to tax revenues through sales, registrations, and upgrades. States like Michigan and California, where the automotive industry plays a pivotal role in the economy, stand to lose substantial funding for public services if this source of income disappears. For individual collectors, the stakes are deeply personal. Many enthusiasts have poured their life savings into restoring and maintaining these vehicles. A sudden ban would render their investments worthless, creating a ripple effect of financial losses that extends far beyond the individual. Yet the economic impact is only part of the story. What about the cultural significance tied to these machines? Cultural significance. Classic cars are not just machines. They are rolling pieces of history, embodying America's identity and spirit of innovation. From the post-war prosperity of the 1950s to the muscle car era of the 1960s and 70s, vintage vehicles are more than just modes of transportation. They are cultural artifacts that tell the story of America's industrial ingenuity and societal shifts. Losing them would be akin to erasing entire chapters of history. Car clubs, parades, and shows serve as communal spaces where enthusiasts come together to celebrate this heritage. Consider the Rose Parade in Pasadena, where restored classics carry celebrities and politicians, or local car meets where families bond over their shared passion for vintage vehicles. These events foster a sense of connection and pride that transcends generations. Classic cars also play an educational role, teaching younger generations about mechanics, engineering, and craftsmanship. Restoring a vintage vehicle is a labor of love, often requiring years of dedication. These hands-on experiences provide invaluable lessons in patience, problem solving, and creativity. For many, these cars are more than just possessions. They are part of their identity. The proposed ban feels like an attack not just on their hobbies, but on their values and way of life. It threatens to silence the engines that have carried stories, dreams, and aspirations for decades. As we delve deeper, it becomes crucial to question the motivations behind this proposal. Are they as straightforward as they seem, or is there more lurking beneath the surface? Unmasking the motivations. Is the push to ban vintage cars really about environmental progress, or is it driven by hidden agendas? On the surface, the government's proposed ban on vintage cars appears to be a bold step toward reducing emissions and combating climate change. However, critics argue that this narrative may only scratch the surface of a more complex and politically charged issue. California's role as a trailblazer in environmental policy has heavily influenced the proposal. The California Air Resources Board has been championing zero-emission zones, a concept borrowed from London's ultra-low emission zones, where vehicles not meeting emission standards are fined or restricted. This aligns with broader federal ambitions for cleaner cities and reduced carbon footprints. But skeptics question why vintage cars, a niche market with limited environmental impact, are being targeted. After all, these vehicles are typically driven sparingly. Meanwhile, industries like aviation, maritime shipping, and manufacturing contribute vastly greater amounts of greenhouse gases. The motivations seem more symbolic than practical. Classic cars, for many, represent a bygone era of American independence and ingenuity. Some critics suggest that targeting these vehicles may reflect a broader shift toward regulating personal freedoms under the guise of environmentalism. Additionally, there is speculation about economic incentives. Transitioning to zero-emission transportation could open new markets for automakers and energy providers, from electric vehicle sales to charging infrastructure. This raises the question, is the ban about emissions, or is it a calculated move to reshape the automotive industry? While the motivations remain a subject of intense debate, the practical implications of this proposal are equally contentious. Let's explore its impact on individual rights and freedoms. The fight for personal freedoms. What happens when the government's pursuit of progress clashes with individual liberty? For many Americans, owning a classic car is about more than nostalgia. It is an expression of freedom. The open road, symbolized by these vintage vehicles, represents the liberty to explore, innovate, and preserve history. The proposed ban feels, to some, like an erosion of these core values. The backlash has been fierce, particularly from enthusiasts and collectors who view the proposal as an infringement on their rights. These individuals argue that the government is overreaching by targeting private property, especially when classic cars account for such a negligible fraction of total emissions. Organizations like the Specialty Equipment Market Association have rallied to protect these freedoms. By lobbying lawmakers and raising public awareness, they aim to preserve the rights of collectors while highlighting the cultural and economic significance of vintage vehicles. This debate also raises broader questions about the role of government in personal choices. If vintage cars can be banned today, what might be targeted tomorrow? Critics argue that policies like this set a dangerous precedent where symbolism trumps substance in policy making. As the fight for personal freedom intensifies, the ripple effects on the automotive industry are becoming impossible to ignore. Implications for the automotive industry. Could the ban on classic cars disrupt an industry that thrives on nostalgia and innovation? The classic car market is not just a cultural phenomenon, it is a critical segment of the automotive industry. From restoration shops to aftermarket parts suppliers, this ecosystem supports thousands of jobs and generates billions in revenue annually. For automakers, the classic car market plays a unique role in brand loyalty. Companies like Ford and Chevrolet have long relied on the legacy of vehicles like the Mustang and Camaro to build emotional connections with consumers. These iconic models reinforce brand identity, ensuring that enthusiasts remain loyal across generations. If the proposed ban becomes a reality, the ripple effects could be devastating. Restoration shops, often small family-run businesses, would face financial ruin. Suppliers of specialized parts and and accessories for vintage vehicles would lose their customer base, and auction houses that generate millions in sales could see demand plummet. Manufacturers are already expressing concerns about the long-term consequences. Losing the classic car market could erode cultural connections to their brands, making it harder to attract future customers. For example, a Chevrolet Enthusiast restoring a 1969 Camaro today might be more inclined to purchase a modern Chevrolet EV tomorrow. Without this connection, automakers risk losing valuable market segments. Beyond industry-specific implications, the proposal also threatens the livelihoods of local communities that depend on classic car culture for economic vitality. Local economies in peril. What happens when the heartbeat of small-town America begins to falter? Classic car culture is not confined to collectors and enthusiasts. It is deeply intertwined with the economic fabric of local communities. Car shows, parades, and auctions attract visitors from across the country, bringing significant revenue to small towns and cities. Take Monterey, California, home to the prestigious Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance during Monterey Car Week. This event alone generates millions of dollars in tourism revenue, supporting local businesses from hotels to restaurants. Similarly, events like the Woodward Dream Cruise in Michigan draw hundreds of thousands of visitors, providing a vital economic boost to the region. If vintage cars are banned or restricted, the economic fallout could be catastrophic. Many small towns already struggling with industrial decline rely on these events to sustain their economies. The loss of tourism revenue would force closures, layoffs, and financial instability, leaving lasting scars on these communities. Local governments too would feel the pinch. Taxes collected from car-related sales, registrations, and events fund public services like schools and infrastructure. A decline in revenue would strain budgets, forcing difficult decisions about resource allocation. For many communities, classic cars are more than just a hobby. They are a lifeline. Losing them would mean losing a piece of their identity and economic stability. As we delve deeper into the consequences, it becomes evident that the cultural stakes are just as high as the economic ones. A legacy worth preserving. How do you put a price on preserving a piece of history? Classic cars are more than machines. They are tangible reminders of a bygone era that shaped the nation. Each vintage vehicle tells a story of design innovation, industrial ingenuity, and the cultural shifts that define generations. From the muscle cars of the 1960s to the elegant roadsters of the 1950s, these vehicles are rolling time capsules. For many, owning a classic car is akin to preserving a family heirloom. Enthusiasts dedicate countless hours to restoration, breathing new life into these relics of the past. This passion goes beyond personal satisfaction. It is about ensuring that future generations can see, touch, and experience history firsthand. Classic cars are also central to cultural events that bring people together. Parades, car shows, and community gatherings foster a sense of unity and pride. Events like the annual Rose Parade in Pasadena or the Woodward Dream Cruise in Michigan celebrate automotive heritage and attract families, enthusiasts, and tourists alike. The proposed ban threatens to erase this cultural legacy. If vintage cars are removed from public roads, they risk becoming mere museum exhibits, divorced from their original purpose. This would rob future generations of the opportunity to witness history in motion and to understand the innovations that paved the way for modern transportation. While the cultural importance of classic cars is undeniable, the focus on their emissions footprint has spurred a wave of technological innovation aimed at preserving these icons for a sustainable future. Innovations in sustainability. Could modern technology save classic cars from extinction? In the face of mounting environmental concerns, the classic car community has embraced innovation as a means to bridge the gap between tradition and sustainability. Electric vehicle conversions and synthetic fuels are emerging as viable solutions to ensure that vintage cars can coexist with modern environmental standards. Electric vehicle conversions have gained traction in recent years, offering a way to preserve classic designs while eliminating harmful emissions. Companies like Zelectric and EV West specialize in retrofitting classic cars with electric powertrains. These conversions not only reduce the vehicle's environmental impact, but also enhance their reliability and performance. Owners can enjoy the aesthetic and historical value of their cars without worrying about emissions regulations. Synthetic fuels represent another groundbreaking development. Companies like Porsche are investing in carbon-neutral fuels that could allow internal combustion engines to operate with minimal environmental impact. These fuels mimic traditional gasoline in function, but are produced using renewable energy and carbon capture technologies. While still in the early stages of development, synthetic fuels hold immense promise for keeping classic cars on on the road without contributing to climate change. These innovations demonstrate that environmental progress does not have to come at the expense of cultural heritage. By investing in sustainable solutions, enthusiasts can protect the legacy of classic cars while aligning with modern values. While technology offers hope, the battle to save vintage vehicles is not just about innovation. It is also about rallying communities and political will to preserve these cherished icons. The enthusiast community strikes back. When passion meets purpose, revolutions happen. The classic car community is not taking the proposed ban lying down. Across the nation, enthusiasts, restorers, and collectors are mobilizing to protect their rights and preserve their beloved vehicles. Online forums, social media platforms, and car clubs have become hubs of activity, with members sharing updates, organizing protests, and strategizing their response. Grassroots movements have gained remarkable traction. Car rallies and parades are no longer just celebrations. They have become statements of defiance. These events showcase the cultural and economic significance of vintage cars, drawing attention to the potential consequences of the ban. Organizations like the Specialty Equipment Market Association have stepped up as key allies. Known for advocating for automotive enthusiasts, SEMA has launched campaigns to raise awareness and lobby lawmakers. Their efforts underscore the importance of classic cars as cultural artifacts, emphasizing that their impact on emissions is negligible compared to other sources of pollution. The movement has also inspired a wave of creativity. Enthusiasts are using platforms like YouTube and Instagram to tell their stories, highlighting the craftsmanship and passion behind restoring vintage vehicles. These narratives resonate with a broader audience, turning public opinion against the ban and fostering a sense of solidarity within the community. While the enthusiast community rallies to protect their rights, the debate has reached a new level of intensity as lawmakers weigh in on the controversy, political pushback, and the road ahead. And when culture and policy collide, the stakes are more than just political, they're personal. The proposal to ban vintage cars has sparked fierce debates across the political spectrum. In states like California, where automotive culture is deeply ingrained, the backlash has been particularly intense. Lawmakers are now grappling with the cultural and economic implications of the proposal, as well as the public outcry it has generated. Conservative politicians have framed the ban as an attack on personal freedoms and private property rights. Representative Doug LaMalfa of Northern California has been especially vocal, arguing that the proposal reflects a radical green agenda that threatens livelihoods and traditions. His stance resonates with many who view the ban as government overreach. Interestingly, the resistance is not limited to one side of the aisle. Some progressive lawmakers have also expressed reservations about the ban, citing concerns about its practicality and fairness. They argue that targeting classic cars, which are rarely driven and often cherished as collectibles, is an ineffective strategy for combating climate change. Instead, they advocate for incentives that encourage sustainable practices without alienating communities. The debate reflects broader tensions in America's approach to climate policy. While some see aggressive measures as essential for progress, others view them as overreach that prioritizes symbolism over substance. The outcome of this political battle will have far-reaching implications. If the proposal succeeds, it could set a precedent for targeting other aspects of car culture. If it fails, it will signal the power of grassroots movements and the enduring appeal of classic cars. As the political and cultural battles unfold, the future of classic cars hangs in the balance. Can sustainability and tradition coexist? Is it possible to save the planet without erasing history? The push for sustainability has placed classic cars in the crosshairs, yet these vehicles are far from incompatible with a greener future. The question is not whether classic cars have a place in modern society, it's how to make that place sustainable. Electric vehicle conversions represent one of the most promising solutions. By replacing traditional internal combustion engines with electric powertrains, vintage cars can meet modern emission standards while preserving their iconic designs. Companies like Zelectric and EV West are pioneering this approach, retrofitting classics like the Volkswagen Beetle and Ford Mustang with electric motors. Though the cost can be high, often exceeding $20,000, falling EV prices and advancements in conversion technology may make this option more accessible in the coming years. Another avenue lies in synthetic fuels. Unlike traditional fossil fuels, synthetic options are created using renewable energy and carbon capture technologies, making them nearly carbon neutral. Porsche and other automotive innovators are already investing in these fuels, which could keep classic cars on the road without the need for extensive modifications. Even with these advancements, the preservation of classic cars requires collaboration between enthusiasts, manufacturers, and policymakers. By supporting promoting sustainable practices and fostering innovation, society can ensure these vehicles remain a part of the cultural fabric while aligning with environmental goals. But technology is just one part of the puzzle. The broader implications of banning classic cars extend beyond sustainability to include profound economic and cultural consequences. Economic impact. Communities at risk. What happens to small-town America when the heartbeat of car culture fades? The classic car industry is more than a niche. It's a vital economic engine for countless communities across the United States. From local car shows to world-renowned events like Monterey Car Week, these gatherings generate billions of dollars in tourism revenue. Hotels, restaurants, and small businesses all depend on the influx of visitors that classic car culture brings. A ban on vintage cars would send shockwaves through this ecosystem. Small-town mechanics, family-owned restoration shops, and parts suppliers would face existential threats. These businesses, often passed down through generations, are integral to their communities. The loss of this industry would not only hurt these businesses, but also erase a unique aspect of local identity. Take, for example, Detroit's Woodward Dream Cruise, an event that celebrates the city's automotive heritage and attracts over 1 million visitors annually. The economic impact of such events extends far beyond ticket sales, creating opportunities for small businesses to thrive. Removing vintage cars from the roads would jeopardize these opportunities, leaving communities scrambling to fill the economic void. The economic case for preserving classic cars is undeniable. While sustainability is crucial, it must be balanced with protecting the livelihoods and traditions that have been built around these cherished vehicles. However, the fight to save classic cars is not only about money, it's also about safeguarding the cultural heritage they represent, the cultural backbone of classic cars. Can you imagine an America without the roar of a 1969 Mustang? Classic cars are woven into the very fabric of American identity. They represent freedom, innovation, and the open road. From the elegant curves of a 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air to the raw power of a Dodge Charger, these vehicles symbolize eras of change, progress, and artistic expression. For enthusiasts, owning and restoring a classic car is a labor of love. It's not just about the mechanics, it's about preserving a piece of history. These cars serve as tangible reminders of a time when America led the world in automotive innovation. Classic cars also play a crucial role in community bonding. Local car clubs, parades, and shows bring people together, fostering connections that go beyond generational and cultural divides. Events like the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance showcase not just the cars, but also the passion and craftsmanship of the people who maintain them. If the proposed ban becomes reality, much of this cultural richness will be lost. It would be akin to tearing pages out of the nation's history book, leaving future generations with little more than photographs and anecdotes of an era they'll never truly experience. With the stakes so high, the battle to save classic cars has become a rallying cry for enthusiasts, industry leaders, and lawmakers alike, fighting for the future of classics. When the road ahead looks uncertain, how do you navigate the twists and turns? The fight to save classic cars has unified a diverse coalition of enthusiasts, industry professionals, and advocacy groups. Organizations like the Specialty Equipment Market Association are leading the charge, lobbying lawmakers to reconsider policies that unfairly target vintage vehicles. Grassroots efforts are also gaining momentum. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for organizing rallies, spreading awareness, and sharing personal stories that highlight the cultural and emotional value of classic cars. These efforts aim to influence public opinion and demonstrate that banning vintage vehicles is not the answer. Lawmakers are listening. Bipartisan support for preserving classic cars has emerged, with some politicians advocating for exemptions that would allow these vehicles to continue operating under specific conditions. These compromises include stricter emission standards for frequently driven cars while allowing limited use exceptions for classics. The future of classic cars depends on striking a balance between innovation, tradition, and environmental responsibility. By investing in technologies like EV conversions and synthetic fuels, and by rallying public and political support, it's possible to carve out a sustainable path forward. But as this fight continues, one thing remains clear. Classic cars are more than just machines. They are symbols of freedom, heritage, and innovation that must be protected for future generations. Classic cars are more than just vehicles. They're rolling pieces of history, symbols of freedom, and cherished parts of our culture. As the debate around their future heats up, your voice matters more than ever. What do you think about the proposal to ban vintage cars? Is this a step too far or a necessary move for sustainability? Let us know in the comments below. Your opinion could help shape the future of classic cars.